So yeah, we're not doing that.
Okay.
And we really want to talk tonight about how do you process grief, right?
Yep.
How do we move forward, right? How do we get under that thing before we get over it? Because
Yep.
we've been trained to just get over it, and we do it in a very disruptive way for ourselves and others.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. First thing I wanted to do is define grief.
Okay.
Define grief. So, do people still have a regular dictionary? I was going to say
Well,
Webster's.
it would be great to even like to give them a chance to put their definition of when you
Yeah,
think of grief. What do you think about?
yeah.
And
What
I know
is
you're
grief?
talking, so I'll help you monitor the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. What does grief mean to you? If you can put that in the chat, that will help us too to get a working definition. Um, Google said it is deep sorrow, especially caused by someone's death. And right tonight, I told you we're not just going to talk about death because, okay, I'm going to get there. So
Yes.
many mixed emotions. Yes, thank you, Taisha. Um, I've heard other, and just so folks know, I am a certified grief recovery specialist. And so the Grief Recovery Institute is the only institute in the world that has a evidence-based program around grief. And so I'm certified in that. So I love talking about grief. Oh, thank you, Brenda. Deep aches. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love that you're talking about the deepness of it, not just an ache, but a deep ache, a penetrating ache. So I appreciate that. One definition I've heard of grief is reaching out for someone who's no longer there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard a definition of grief of reaching out for someone who should have been there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to be hot for a minute. Do y'all know what hot is yet?
They know what's hot.
Humble, open, and transparent.
There
Ooh,
you go.
I need to have a hot moment. We absolutely grieve unmet expectations. Okay, I'm gonna start small. When I was 23, I had a big. I probably took out. I probably did that roll you were
You did
talking
the
about,
tornado
Sabrina.
roll.
I did a tornado roll. I literally had a fit, cried my eyes out because in my mind I was supposed to be married with kids by then.
Yeah.
23, just crazy. Tornado roll by myself, just
Yeah.
up and down. That unmet expectation. And then what I realized, another hot moment, I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. I also realized I grieve the relationship me and my mother never had.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a different level. It's an ongoing process. Grieving unmet expectations. I know I started this radical recovery process with talking about addiction. You can grieve, and I tell my patients all the time, as soon as we take that substance away or that thing, as soon as we take that food, that dessert you had to give up while working with Samantha Wise, that big plate, you grieve the absence of that thing.
Yep.
So we're constantly dealing with grief. Thank you guys for in the chat. Did you catch some more of those definitions in there?
I did, and I love the fact that a lot of people have already identified that grief is not only related to death.
Yes.
There's so many different things that you can grieve. Yeah, so good stuff. They're
Yeah.
on it.
They're on it.
They're
Okay.
on it.
And actually, Tanya, not Tanya, I don't know if you, for those of you who are in the reset, you guys are gonna have to go back and look at her full testimony on grief because she did a beautiful job at storytelling
Yes.
about other moments in her life where she was losing, right? The loss of a house, the loss of a job, and how those things accumulated before right? She
Yeah.
had a major loss. And so, if you guys didn't catch that, please go back and get that because this is why we say things like, as clinicians, you've survived 100% of your worst days.
Yeah.
You're already good at dealing with grief. No one told you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just puts me in the mind of, we've talking about definitions of grief. And one of the things that I always think about, especially as it pertains to the loss of someone, grief is not something you will technically get over. It's something we learn to live with. And I think where we get stuck is the living part. We don't do the living.
Yes, that's huge, right? Because we think it's something, a destination we have to arrive to.
Yes.
Right. And how we get into these myths. And I want to ask folks who are watching, what have you been told about grief? As soon as you lose someone, what do people tell you to help you during that time? Not just with loss of a person, but when you lose your job. I mean, we're all in grief recovery right now because when the pandemic started, things for us stopped and the grieving process began.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As they're answering your question, one of the things that strikes me is how when we're in our grieving process, no matter what the situation or the scenario we're grieving, that we also are faced with judgment. Like people will judge the way you grieve. I saw a news story, article, whatever you want to call it, tabloid, talking about Nene Leakes. And like she was ready to start dating again. And them people came for her.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, well, what is the time limit? Like who can judge her?
Yeah. That's huge. And we also judge ourselves during the process, right?
Yeah.
Like I should be crying more. I should be a little bit more sad. Or why am I crying so much? I need to get over this.
Yeah. Oh no, Felicia, nobody said get over it, life goes on. Who said that? I'm praying for you.
Yeah. Wow. Get over it. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm telling you, even the messages that don't sound like get over it, they're saying get over it, right? Mm-hmm. Some things that people say, they actually do mean well, right? Mm-hmm. Even simple things like as soon as you tell someone about a loss, they say, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. That one for me, as soon as they say I'm sorry, now I feel like I got to take care of them too. In the moment.
What about they're in a better place?
They're in a better place. Whew.
That wouldn't get your eyes scratched if it was somebody you really loved.
They're in your mind, you're thinking, no, the best place that they need to be is right here next to me.
Exactly.
Right.
So if you find yourself saying those things, as of today, don't say that. Not helpful.
Not helpful. It's a myth, right? Mm-hmm. And some people, and I'm glad you said, Sabrina, earlier, something we have to learn to live with because the judgment continues. Like, they still sad. It's been 5 years since they gone. That marriage ended 17 years ago. She's still trying to make the pork chops that he used to make on Sunday. Why are you laughing?
I'm sorry. Another one that gets me too is when like say you have a loss, like just say you lost your dog, right? Yes. And it's my dog. I lost my dog. And you comfort me by telling me about your loss. No, it's not don't do that.
Yes. The hard thing is that that's how we see joining in, right, in the conversation. But comparing losses is really, really hard.
Yeah.
Right. Try not to compare losses with other people.
Felicia says, my brother got killed July 8th. Her papa died August 8th. And then August 25th, her biological father died. And now my family wants me to get over it. Oh, my love.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Wow.
That's a lot. We're praying for your heart.
Yes. And everyone, and Felicia, I want to say this to you. You don't get to put them all in one grief basket and say, okay, now I'm going to grieve. And now I'm going to get over it. Right? Every single loss is unique to you.
Yes. So that's
every
three
relationship.
Different baskets.
Yes. These are three different baskets. You're going to need different times, different triggers are going to trigger you for different people, right? And grief has no time limit. Let's just put that out there.
Right.
There's no time limit. How you live with it is very different. We're going to talk about that in just a bit, but it has no time limit. And here's why your grief is so unique. It depends on the relationship status.
Yeah.
Your relationship with that person, not your
Yeah.
mama's relationship, not your friend's relationship, how you related to that person.
Yeah.
The timing, right? She just mentioned a couple things, right? Back to back to back.
Yeah.
Some clinicians call this complex grief, compounded grief, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to combine or compound it all. They're separate things you need an opportunity to grieve, right? There's other things like the circumstances, right? She just mentioned one. Someone got killed. How people leave this place matters.
Yeah.
It will impact your grief big time. So thank you. I really thank you for your transparency tonight. Thank you for showing up. D round. How about when people say, I know how you feel? Oh,
Yeah.
that's a hard one.
Yeah.
You don't know how I feel because you didn't have that relationship with that person.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I think we're just trying to relate to the other person.
Exactly. And I think that we do well, and I think most of us have survived because we are able to take into account they mean well, they're trying to help.
Yes.
Right. My pastor has this thing he teaches us. It's called the ministry of presence.
Yes.
That means just be quiet and present. Like your presence is enough. And I think that those are one of the things that we have to start teaching.
Yes. And I think this is something we can teach on both ends. Us as grievers, right? And those who are around people who are grieving. Just our presence. I mean, Sabrina and I are both clinicians. We can tell you right now, sometimes just us being in the room, giving a person an opportunity to talk and express themselves is enough.
Exactly. Can I read the comment that was just made? Because I thought it was really profound. Vanessa says, this summer, I made a decision to grieve my biological father and my goddad. They're both still alive. However, I'm the only one that wanted a relationship. I've learned it comes in waves. I love them both dearly, but in order to move forward, I knew I needed to grieve them. That just gave me chills.
Yes. And part of the grief process, and she's already taken me there, is forgiveness.
Yeah.
Here goes that F word again. They told me not to cuss on here, but the forgiveness word, forgiving people for things that they don't even know they did, forgiving people for their absence. Now you have to grieve something that someone else is not sorry for. It's different, right? Like your definition, Sabrina, they don't have the capacity to pay that debt.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's deep. Who put that in there, Vanessa?
That was Vanessa, yeah.
Yeah. And the grief process is something that, especially for people who are alive, right? If you're grieving a relationship, a marriage, you're grieving the loss of whatever, a substance, right? Something that's still present. You don't need their permission or their participation to go through the grieving process or to forgive them.
Can you say that part again?
Yes, you don't need their permission or their participation to grieve that relationship or forgive them. Because really, forgiveness is giving up the hope of a different or better yesterday. You got to give that up.
Yep.
And I know that's hard. Some people are like, I don't want to grieve or apologize because it's hard. We don't get to sit. And I'm going back to we.
Mm-hmm.
Sabrina, you mentioned that earlier. We haven't been taught how to process
Yeah.
emotional things.
Yep. And you know what we have been taught that I think is erroneous in a lot of ways that kind of catches us up even as we talk about grief and stuff. We're taught that we need closure.
Mm,
And Vanessa's testimony was just so powerful because you don't need closure. You
yeah,
just need to make a decision.
yeah, yeah, yeah. In the grief recovery model, they don't use the word closure; they use the word completion.
Okay.
Right? You don't want to completely close that door. You need to complete the relationship. Right? And there's a process that we kind of guide folks through as far as getting do those apologies, the forgiveness, and I'm not talking about anyone else participating, just
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So back to what you're saying, Sabrina, it's a decision.
It's a decision. And
Yeah.
Vanessa made a big girl decision. Oh
Yes.
man.
Come on, Vanessa.
She chose herself. You know, it puts me in a mind of ultimatums. I hate ultimatums. And a lot
Ooh.
of times, even in grief or in relationships that are in disrepair, we wait for somebody to choose us. That's an ultimatum. Whenever I feel like I need to issue an ultimatum, that's a reminder it's time to choose me.
Yes.
I choose me. And I love the fact that Vanessa chose her.
Yes. And asking for someone to participate in that grief process or asking someone um, or telling someone things like this, I forgive you. When you listen, I'm sorry, ma'am, sir, who's listening. If you do things like this, I forgive you, that's an assault.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're not doing the work.
Yeah. So I wanted to speak this into the atmosphere. Rosalind said, I lost my daughter in April 2021. I realized I will never be the person I was before her death. I was wondering, will I ever get back to the way I was before she died? Or do I just continue to learn how to live with her death one day at a time?
Mm,
Before you answer that, I
yes,
just
go
want
ahead.
you to go back to what you just said with how a person leaves here matters.
How they leave here, when they leave here matters.
Yeah.
How they leave here really matters, right? And so, to answer your question, just briefly, was it Rosalind? I'm sorry,
Yes.
the
Yes.
things are going so
No, no,
fast.
yeah, it's Rosalind.
Rosalind, a lot of times people talk to me about recovery. Recovery, like you asked very specifically, will I go back to who I was? Recovery means return to a previous space. And I want to tell you this, that space doesn't exist anymore,
Mm-mm.
right? Keep going through the process because this is going to be a transformation. This is a transformative process, not a recovering process. I know we use the word recovery a lot, but recovery only means to return to where you were. We can't go back there,
Mm-mm.
especially when we lose people.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And so even as she wrote that, something that came up for me was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I almost went there. I had to train myself to stop doing that. So she doesn't need to take care of me, right? And her loss, her feelings. But yes, it's a process of transformation and not so much recovering to a previous space. Understand that new space. Take it one day at a time. That's a recent event.
Mm-hmm.
We already said it doesn't have no time limit, but the early stages, the more acute stages, are in that first
Mm-hmm.
3 to 6 months, even a year for some people, depending on the closeness,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Krishna said it just seems like you learn to live without them, and that's absolutely it. We never get over it. We learn to live with it, right? And so Taisha said, "What's the significance of when they left?"
Oh, time of when they left. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Um, there's seasons in our lives where we have limited capacity. So when someone leaves, especially during a time where your capacity is really low, matters. It
Mm-hmm.
changes how you grieve, right? Sometimes it makes people really angry, right? Depending on if they already had this much left in their tank, and then there's a huge loss. There's nothing to live for. This is where that hopelessness comes from, right? And so I'm saying time. I don't mean necessarily time of day or month or whatever, because you can be triggered throughout the year. And I'm glad we're talking about grief and loss because holidays are especially difficult, right? These are the times we bring up lots of family memories and things like that, especially as it relates to loss of the person.
Mhm.
So timing, yeah,
Yeah.
it matters.
And can I just affirm, Rosalind is one of our sisters that we do life with,
Yeah.
and she is doing. If we could rate it, she's doing an amazing job living. And
Mm,
sometimes it's moment by moment, one foot in front of the other, second by second. And so I just want to just affirm her,
yeah.
and the strength that is taking her to just get up every day and do some of the things that were familiar to you before.
Mm, yeah. And I'm glad you said day by day. But for some people, it really depends on the relationship.
Yeah.
It's we have to count those seconds and those minutes.
Yep.
We have to get to the day
Yeah.
before we can get through the day.
Mhm.
It's huge. So yeah, thank you for affirming her. Yeah. Um, I also want to talk about just briefly when it comes to losing folks is legacy.
Mhm.
And Lady Elizabeth Hudson talked about it. Um, Simone touched on it. How our lack of planning impacts our grief. Our lack of financial planning impacts our grief.
Absolutely.
Our lack of emotional vulnerability, our resistance to having hot moments
Mhm.
impacts our grief later on, right? Even what you were talking about, Sabrina, yesterday. I mean, we have an opportunity to pass down generational emotional wealth
Mhm.
just by our words, right? You were talking
Mhm.
about the power of our words, and then you put us on this a word diet. Was it a word and what?
A fast. We're
A
fasting.
fast.
Yeah, negative communication fast.
I'm working on that.
Yes.
But how do you see that pertaining with grief?
So, our words are so powerful. They matter. And so, what we talked about yesterday was how sometimes we can speak things over our lives that will actually tie the hands of God. But
Mm,
even when it comes to grief, and I know like we are a dramatic people, that's why I love us so much. But even in grief, we can speak things over our lives that we will have to fight to get out of. I'll never make it without them. My
mm,
life will never be the
oh,
same again. I can't do this. I'll never get over it.
mm,
Right. And those are things that we have to be careful, hurt as it may,
mm,
but we gotta go forward. Right. We don't talk about, even those of us that are in the faith, we have not really embraced the cycle of life.
mm.
And
It's missing.
it's a difficult conversation, but we were not meant to get stuck to the extent that we stop living.
Mm, mm,
Right? Most of us embrace the fact in our faith we're living to live again.
whew,
Right? So this is not it. We got to be careful about the words that we speak.
yeah. I think I hear that a lot, especially in the early stages of grief around a death. Is I can't do it. It's someone said it earlier in the chat. It's deep, a
Yeah.
deep ache, right? And so when you have a deep ache and you say words like this, it penetrates the ache. You're throwing salt on that wound. And sometimes you don't have to say nothing. Okay, you don't have anything positive to say. Just be present with yourself
Hmm.
be present with God, and we'll talk about some of those steps.
Can I
And
just make one more point
oh
too?
yeah,
Like we talked about trauma has memory, right? The
yes,
loss of somebody is a trauma. The sudden loss of someone is a major trauma. So when we recite those things, when we sow those seeds into the trauma, trauma has memory. So even when you're starting to feel better, that trauma comes up, and what seed did you sow into that? I'm
mm,
never going to get over this. I'm never going to be okay. Life will never, I mean, all those things, it starts rehearsed inside that trauma.
yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
No, that's good. That's good. And what it's making me think about is we sow those seeds over smaller losses all the time, right? When we
Yeah.
lose our keys, when we lose our temper, when we every time we lose, we're sowing these seeds of never being well again,
Yep.
never being healed,
Yep.
never being worthy, never being restored is a thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Whew. Um,
Oh, oh, oh.
yeah, go
I don't
ahead.
know if you want to talk about it. Look, oh, oh, oh. I
Yeah.
don't know if you want to talk about it tonight or not, but there's sometimes guilt associated with living and feeling good and having a
Mm.
good day. I ain't gonna say feeling good, but in having a good day, that can also
Mm.
anchor us in grief.
Yes, it can. And for some folks, it's even a survivor's guilt.
Yeah,
You didn't get in the car with them that day. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. The guilt is paralyzing you.
yeah,
The shame will paralyze you and keep you there even longer, right? That's why this grief process, and I'll talk about the 3 R's in just a second, but part of it has to be done in community with other people. Isolation will keep you there. It will keep you there. And we have these things that happen very early in our lives. Loss of safety. For some people, that first loss was a loss of innocence.
yeah,
For some people, that was a loss of security, predictability.
yeah.
And we never learn how to grieve those smaller things. We do these things called a loss inventory. So when that
Stability,
big thing hits, loss of stability,
stability.
we're not even talking about food, lights, bills yet. I'm talking about loss of security,
Yeah,
not feeling safe
yeah,
somewhere. And then we don't talk about it. We don't process it. We get over it, never get under it. So we don't know how to process as a people too. People of color, we don't talk enough about this stuff. I appreciate everyone in this radical reset because you guys have been showing up and showing all the way out, whether it's a deep conversation, whether it's a lighthearted conversation, whether we're talking about exercise or small plates, you keep showing up for yourselves. And I believe that you are changing the generational patterns, not just for yourself, but for everyone watching, everyone around you. Yeah, for sure. Um, this thing about loss, I don't want to miss this part. I want to come back to this part about finances. And I'm
hmm,
a financial person by any means. But even when Simone and Lizzie were talking about it, they said the greatest transfer of wealth is during death.
hmm.
Listen, the fight is a little bit different. The grief hits a little bit different when there's some security. Just talked about loss of security because sometimes when people pass away, we don't just lose the person, we lose our financial stability, our security,
Yeah, income.
income, everything. So here we go. All those different baskets of grief get compounded, right? And so being a good steward over your money, your finances, and being, planning for your own departure. We are all leaving this place. If somebody thought they was going to be here 222 years, I want to be the first to tell you we are all going.
Yeah.
How
And
we
that's one of
prepare
those
matters.
courageous conversations that's so
Yes,
difficult to have.
they are. And I want to challenge folks in here, have that conversation. If you have a living parent or a grandparent or aunties who's big mama and everything happens at her
Mhm.
house, have that conversation. I know it's uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And maybe you're not asking them about them. Maybe tell them what your plans are.
Mhm. I was about to
How,
say that.
how many of us have a plan?
Listen.
I don't want
Something
you to
happened. Something happened to you. Who you want to get that cell phone? Listen, delete. Get my phone.
listen.
Y'all better get my phone. Get my phone and delete.
Have a plan. How many of us really have a plan written out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those courageous conversations are really important. I want to leave everyone with the 3 R's. And a lot of this stuff is part of my workbook that's coming out in January. If you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Vacate Victimville, or my website, vacatevictimville.net, this will be part of a workbook. It's not solely on grief, but grief is one of the chapters. And it's a workbook, so it's stuff that you can do. There's 3 R's I want to leave you with in processing grief. First R is retreat.
Mm,
You have permission to fall back and retreat. But guess what? Retreats are time limited.
okay. Because I was just about to say, please speak on the difference between a retreat and isolation
Yes, 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 yes.
exhibition.
Listen, you get in your retreat, it's small, it's time limited. You get to process the emotional heaviness. And I also suggest this happens with a person, but I'm getting to the next part in just a second. Process the emotional heaviness. You get to scream, cry, eat an entire container of ice cream after the
Yeah.
reset. It's a retreat. You have to, whatever you have to do to take care of yourself emotionally at that time.
Yeah.
It's a retreat. After the retreat, you have to regroup.
Mm-hmm.
Key word, key part of regroup is group.
Okay.
You have to do it in community with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes people say, well, Vernice, I've been going to church. Yeah, but you come in, you sit, you don't talk to nobody, and then you leave and go home. You haven't been in community with other people,
Yeah.
right? So be very mindful not to isolate.
Yeah.
I gave you that little retreat. That's a couple for some people. That's a couple hours. For some others, it's a couple days. But then
Mm-hmm.
you have to regroup, get
Yeah.
in community with other folks.
Yeah. And you know what? And if I can just say this, Bernice, the
Yeah.
time to get in community is now, right? That's when grief happens, you're not going to be able to enter community because you're not going to have the capacity to do so.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I love about this 21 days that we've spent together. We've gotten into community. You know what it feels like to have people in your business. You know what it feels like to have people in your corner, right?
Yes.
Bonita talks openly about the loss of her husband. She just kind of chatted a little bit about it too.
Mm.
When Bonita lost her husband, we literally took over her house. I took off work for like 2 weeks.
Yes, that's community.
Listen, the first night, I slept outside her bedroom door.
Mm.
Right? It takes that
Yes.
to regroup. It
Yeah.
takes that. And in order to have that, you have to be vulnerable and willing to allow people in. So if you've been living by yourself, we were not created to live that way.
Mm.
We need each other.
Yeah. Even for and I want to say this to the person who may be listening, who's an introvert,
Yep.
right? You can be an introvert. You were still created to be in community with others.
Yes.
You just don't get your energy from others like I do.
Yeah.
I'm an extrovert. I get that. But you were created to be in community with other people.
Yeah. We're relational creatures. He
We
created us
are.
for relationship.
Period. That's it. That's why we're doing this, right? And I hope that you don't just show up here. I hope that you're making some friends. I hope you added some people. You try to friend request them. I saw somebody say, are we going to Tahoe? Let's go. Don't threaten me with a good time.
Listen.
And yes, I understand. Oh, thank you for bringing up isolating due to COVID. It's not natural. However, I've actually seen some amazing connections happen because of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
virtually in a virtual space. Don't underestimate this space either, right? I think some folks who needed an excuse to hibernate, to go isolate, soon as COVID happened, they're like, "Ooh, yes, now I don't got to talk to people." We
Yes.
weren't created like that.
No. And the thing with that is the less we do, the less we want to do.
Mm,
And so it requires a greater push. The longer you stay in, the more effort you're going to have to exert to come out.
mm, yeah. And the further you go in and you start detaching yourself from people, the isolation is getting longer and longer, right? We're getting more and more distance from other people. The last R is for reentry.
Okay.
You get to retreat, you regroup with your community, and you re-enter. And that's why I appreciated the question earlier about becoming the person I used to be. No, it's a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's something new. You're living with it. You're living with the incident, with the loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the reason I think I really want to stress this part about reentry is because as long as we're here, I absolutely unequivocally believe that we still have purpose.
Absolutely.
I mean, if Tanya, not Tanya, stayed home, we would not have her testimony.
Mm-hmm.
She would not have been able to help the other women on that call who have also had a major loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's important that you come back. And I want to leave you with this. 2 Corinthians 1:4 says, He always comes alongside us to comfort us in every suffering. So, I don't want y'all to miss this, so that we can come alongside those who are in a painful trial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wait, you don't just want me to process this? You want me to help other people? We can bring them this same comfort that God has poured out upon us.
Mm-hmm.
Even that little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can I just add before, I know
Yes.
we're wrapping up, but your last R was reentry. And I just want to highlight the fact that God will give us grace. He will give you grace for reentry. You don't have to reenter on your own. The scripture says that He will give you peace that surpasses all your understanding. You won't even understand why you're not falling apart because there's a grace for reentry.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. Mm. That's why they call you Grace.
There's a grace. Whatever you're going through, there's a grace for that.
There's a grace for that.
There's a grace for that. And there is certainly one for reentry.
Yeah. Yeah. You're still on assignment.
Yeah.
We're still on assignment. Yes. Thank you, Christina, for the recap. Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate. I know Fridays I've been coming hard and heavy with addiction. Then the second time I called y'all tweakers, and now we're talking about grief. So these have been some pretty heavy Fridays, but I just want to say to all the radical resetters, we love y'all. We appreciate you all. And just know that every loss, you take losses all the time. You take losses. How you lose is how you live.
Yeah.
How you learn to lose is how you learn to live
Yeah.
and to grow and to reset.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you all.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing your platform with me tonight and allowing me to sit with you and to share space as we have this conversation that is not easy. There was so much more that we could have talked about. On the topic. I am looking forward to your workbook that's coming out January 2022. If there's still work to be done, ladies and gentlemen, let's get it.
Let's get it. Good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.